All right, guys. This is Todd, MHN Media Happening Now. I This is my third time recording this because the settings, every time I finished, it was like, oops, I got a couple things wrong there. Everything's corrected, should be good. This is how much money do Americans need to live comfortably in the United States. We're going to review and react, and then I'm going to show you a couple screens after that that'll really get you thinking. So stay tuned for the end.
The average American says they need to earn $233,000 a year to be financially comfortable. But in 2021, American workers on average made only $75,203 annually.
Americans are sort of looking at how much money they would like to have to be financially secure, and that ends up being basically three times what the average income is in this country. And to be
Three times what the average income is in this country. Three times. It's pretty significant. Let that sink in.
essentially wealthy or really successful, it's magnitudes above that.
72% of Americans said they weren't financially secure given their current finances. And more than a quarter of Americans said they'll likely never be financially secure.
By the numbers, their debt is lower and their savings are higher coming out of the pandemic, but they're more anxious about what's going to happen next, if they have job stability, if they're going to be able to have secure retirement.
With well over half of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, many are failing to meet some of their modest financial goals.
Well over. Let this thing sink in. You guys can see the title and the timeline there because I had to kind of shrink it to fit everything in, but let that sink in. Well over half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. This source from CNBC, they say 61%. I've seen another source that says 65%.
There are actually millions of people struggling. It's not something that people want to talk about, but if you're in a place where your financial security feels super precarious, you're not alone. And it's not your fault.
So how did it become so difficult to be financially secure in America? And what can you do about it? Let's do some budgeting. Americans working full-time earned a median monthly income of about $4,400 during the second quarter
Pay attention to these numbers. Really pay attention.
of 2023. The average worker takes home 75.2% of gross wages after taxes and benefits, shrinking the take-home pay to about $3,308. And that just isn't enough to cover the cost of living in America today.
So that's what you're really making right there. Because let's face it, what goes in your pocket is what you're making.
The cost of healthcare, that has skyrocketed. The cost of attending college has skyrocketed. The cost of purchasing a home has skyrocketed. But nowhere has anyone said wage growth is up 15%, right?
Take a look at some of the most essential expenses for Americans. The median monthly rent in the US is $2,029 as of June 2023. That amount already accounts for over 46% of the Americans' median pre-tax income. But most US agencies classify spending more than 30% of one's gross monthly income on rent as being rent burdened. Meanwhile, the median mortgage payment for a 2,400 square foot house was $1,957 per month. However, a common rule of thumb advises spending 28% or less of your pre-tax income on mortgage payments. For the median gross monthly earnings, that translates to just $1,232.
As we talk to households and talk to consumers out in the real world, especially those, say, under 40, housing is the big issue. Rent, mortgage. It is the biggest concern that people aren't going to be able to make the next payment.
Inflation is really hurting individuals having stability in their housing. And I think sometimes we underestimate that if you have uncertainty in your housing, it causes uncertainty everywhere.
Exactly, and this is why so many people from the young generation aren't motivated to work. A lot of people say, oh, they're lazy and this and that. Well, it's also got to do with being incentivized. Human beings do whatever they are incentivized to do. If there's no incentive for them to work hard, they're thinking about how difficult it is just to survive, and they're thinking, how am I going to get ahead? How am I ever going to buy a house, afford a spouse, let alone a family and a couple cars? And
Housing is also the reason why cities have become more difficult to afford. Americans said it would require more than $1 million in net worth to be financially comfortable in places like San Francisco, New York, and Southern California.
This is why we've seen some migration or mobility around the country where some people say, I'm living in a high-cost state like California or New York. We really want to sort of pack up and go to an area that's less expensive. And one of the ironies of that is those places that were cheaper before are now becoming more expensive.
Exactly.
Americans spend on average $690.75 on food every month. According
Pay attention to these numbers. This should make you think.
to the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that amount is significantly higher than any of USDA's estimated grocery bills, including more generous and liberal food plans. Add the out-of-pocket health expenditures that cost the average Americans $96.42 every month, and you get a total expense of $2,816.17 for renters and $2,744.17 for homeowners. That amount already accounts for 85% of the median take-home pay for average American renters.
85% of the median take-home pay for average American renters. 85%.
And over 82% for an average homeowner. This is excluding other essential expenses like transportation, childcare, and debt payments.
Many Americans are really struggling with just the increase of costs of living and food and housing, utility.
So it seems like being a homeowner is only just slightly less expensive than being a renter. Didn't used to be like that.
Bills have gone up. Car insurance has gone up. Homeowners insurance has gone up. And how can they pay for them but also meet other goals that they have too?
Car insurance has gone way up, and it doesn't matter if you're a good driver or not. It used to be that if you were a good driver, you'd get a really good rate. Now it's like, oh no, and they'll tell you if you call your insurance company and say, well, why is my rate gone up so much? Well, it's the zip code you live in or whatever. So see, they've changed how they justify charging you more. Instead of, oh, well, you've had tickets or you've had accidents. No, if you got a clean driving record, it's the zip code you live in.
Budgeting experts advise Americans to spend just 50% of their net income on essentials, 30% on wants, and 20% on savings or paying off debt.
We see that allocation shifting.
And not many people can afford it. They don't have the budget to live by those numbers. Sure, it'd be nice if they could.
Significantly, where people are spending 75% of their take home just on needs, which leaves very little for wants and very little for saving for your financial future. So depending upon where you live and of course your income, many Americans really cannot meet that target allocation.
That's right. That's why so many people are struggling and stressed out. When you guys go out in public, I want you to look around and see how many people are actually smiling. How many people actually look happy and full of joy, right? How many people look like they're really enjoying life? Because I think you'll find that you'll see the opposite. Barely anybody smiling out there.
So much of managing your financial life in America today is like drinking from a fire hose. I think many households are not able to show up and impose a framework of their own design onto their finances. Many are still in this reactionary space where they're just trying to figure out how to make ends meet.
The Federal Reserve has implemented 11 interest rate hikes to combat inflation since March 2022.
I'm going to pause that so you can screenshot it. Look at that. Federal funds effective rate, and it goes from 2001 to 2023.
But more than a third of Americans said rising interest rates kept them from financial comfort.
Higher interest rates really can stand in the way of affordability for many financial activities or
Yep, listen to what this lady's about to say.
decisions that people want to engage in, and home purchases is sort of at the top of that list.
Look at the person who was going to buy a house that was, let's say, $375,000 2 years ago. Their monthly payment would have been less than $2,000. Now it's about $3,400, and it's the same house, right? The only thing that has changed is the interest rate.
Purchasing a
So you think about that. Now, has your income gone up by $1,400 a month? That was a $1,400 increase per month.
car is more expensive. It's more expensive to maintain a balance on a credit card, with the new offers for a credit card, even for the best qualified individual, being at 20.5%.
So there you go, you guys. I'm going to leave it there and show you two final screens that'll help you think. I'm going to pause that video there. I'm going to show you this little piece of information I have for you. You're going to like this. So check this out. So this is a map. As you can see, this is from zerohedge.com. And this is a map of what it takes to live in the United States comfortably in each state. Now, if you look at, I'm going to go to my bigger screen here. So if you look at Florida, where most people are fleeing to get away from more expensive states, Florida is one of the states, not the only state people are fleeing to. $209,000 a year for a family to live comfortably. Florida used to be known as the cheap, state to live in, right? The sunshine state, where the sunshine pays your bills. The lowest state there you see on the bottom is Mississippi at $178,000 a year that a family would need to. This is just to live comfortably without having to sweat bills. Texas, $201,000, and so on. Look at California, $277,000. New York, $279,000 a year. You can take a screenshot of that while I've got it paused, or while I've got it on that screen. I want to show you guys this last and final one. This is an article the first one there, the map was from Zero Hedge. This one is from epi.org. And this is talking about minimum wage and how it affects workers. And you can read the article there. It says the typical worker who would be affected by an increase in the minimum wage to $10.10, and obviously this is a while back, per hour by 2015. I've seen even worse statistics since then. But look at these bullet points. The average worker, and this is from, let me see when this article was published. This was clear back from August 28th of 2013. So I want to show you guys how much worse it's gotten, because these numbers are 11 years old now as of this August. The average age affected of minimum wage workers is 35 years old. 88% of all affected workers are at least 20 years old. Think about that. 3.5% are at least 40 years old. 56% are women, 28% have children, 55% work full-time or 35 hours at least per week, right, minimum. 44% have at least some college education. The latest statistic I heard was from a channel called Millennial Steam. He posted it up. It was 88% of workers, of minimum wage workers, are the minimum, how did it go? It was something to do with 20 years old. It was kind of like these numbers, but it was a little bit different. It was like 88% of workers, it was 88% of workers, minimum wage workers, are 20 years of age or older. The average age, not the oldest, the average age of those workers was 35 years old. And people say, well, what, people talk about raising the minimum wage, and other people say, no, we can't do that. It'll raise the cost of everything. Okay. And they say, those jobs, those retail jobs, those fast food jobs or whatever, those are for people in high school, right? Or that didn't go to college. The problem is these jobs, those very jobs, are the only jobs that a lot of people have left, because our country, the United States, has been gutting the country of good jobs for the past so many decades now for a multitude of reasons. So check it out. And you can do a little bit of research on your own as well. Just type in some of these search terms. So anyway, this has been Todd with MHN Media Happening Now, and I'm going to see you guys real soon. I'm going to have more for you. All right, so you guys have a good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are, and I will be talking to you soon.